Sletten joins us now for more on this. He's the research director at the New Hampshire Fiscal Policy Institute. Phil, it's great to have you. Let's talk economy, which is really in the forefront of voters' minds. In recent years, interest rates have reached their highest levels in decades, but inflation has fallen. It still remains above average, though. There are these great economic challenges happening in the minds of voters, as I said. What is a priority for voters in New Hampshire? What are they thinking about?
Yeah, well, thank you for having me. And like the rest of the nation, inflation has slowed in New Hampshire relative to what we saw in, for example, 2022. But there are some cost areas that are particularly acute here in New Hampshire. One is housing, for example. We have a severe housing shortage in the state, and the cost of housing, both when it comes to rental housing and purchasing a home, has gone up substantially. So the cost of the monthly median household cost for a rent and utilities in an apartment has gone up about 40% between 2018 and 2023. And for purchasing a home, the median home sale price has gone up 66% in that same time period. Our rental vacancy rate is below 1% and has been for the last 3 years. So housing is one of those cost drivers that has eaten up more households' budgets. It means they can't spend money on other things in the economy, goods, services, and other things that are costs in their family budgets.
You know, housing is such a big fraction of what one spends on. But there is also good news in terms of unemployment. Under the Biden administration, unemployment levels have remained low and creation of jobs has soared. To what extent has that impacted people in New Hampshire?
Yeah, the federal supports for the economy, both in 2020 and 2021, have had pretty profound impacts on the economy in New Hampshire, as they have nationwide. The recovery from the pandemic recession was much faster than the recovery from the Great Recession of 2007 to 2009. Certainly true in New Hampshire, and even to a greater extent in New Hampshire than we saw in the nation as a whole. The economy in New Hampshire grew faster than the nation overall in 2021, but since then it has slowed a fair bit, and growth has been more tepid than we've seen in the economy overall, as well as job growth relative to the national economy. And that is in part because not that there's a lack of economic demand or pent-up willingness to buy goods and services. It's because there are too few workers in the economy in New Hampshire to fill all the jobs that are available in the state. That lack of workforce means that our job growth is slower and our economic growth is slower than we've seen in the nation overall. And that's because of our demographics, as well as our housing shortage, and as well as a lack of affordable and accessible childcare. All those factors are working against New Hampshire's economic growth, both in the shorter term and the longer term. That being said, federal supports for the economy certainly helped boost job growth and economic growth in 2021 and have helped through 2022 as well, and will continue to help with the added infrastructure legislation, for example, that will provide resources over a longer period of time, and the flexible federal funds from the American Rescue Plan Act that states have. They have until 2026 to spend those dollars. Those will continue to support the economy for some time to come.
I mean, one thing is how things are going right now and into the future, but how are people feeling? Overall, what is the status check on how people feel when it comes to their finances compared to 4 years ago?
Yes. So median household income in New Hampshire is higher than it was in 2019 if we look at the 2022 data, but it did slip relative to inflation between 2021 and 2022. That was true nationally as well. The slip appears to have been a little bit larger in New Hampshire than it was in the nation overall. But again, if you adjust for inflation, median household income is still higher than it was prior to the pandemic. We see that wages are higher than they were average wages are higher than they were after adjusting for inflation in 2019, but they're not higher than they were in 2021. It really depends on the industry whether you're higher or not in New Hampshire. And about a third of households in New Hampshire, according to survey data, say that they are having a somewhat or very difficult time meeting usual household expenses. And that suggests that there are a fair number of households who are struggling. That number is higher than it was in 2021 and in 2020 when there was more federal support for the economy. So relative to 4 years ago, some of the numbers suggest that people are in a better shape. But relative to 2 years ago, there's still a fair bit of struggling going on in the economy, especially since we saw inflation, particularly energy prices, pick up in 2022. And a lot of households are still struggling with that or seeking to find ways to recover from that are more elusive than they desire.
And that is data and feeling that people go and vote with. Phil Sletten, thank you so much.
Thank you very much.